Imagine you just poured a $50,000 commercial foundation down in Tennessee.
Oh, man.
Right. The concrete is curing, your crew is actually ahead of schedule for once, and suddenly a state inspector walks onto the site and just shuts the entire operation down.
Just like that.
Just like that. And not because of a structural flaw or, a safety violation. They shut you down because your HR software back in your Ohio home office didn't sync with a brand new state compliance law that passed like 3 weeks ago.
Which is terrifying.
It really is. Q1 of 2026 just dropped a massive regulatory bomb on the construction industry. We are looking at 7 new laws that fundamentally change how you operate your business, from how you hire to how you secure your blueprints. I'm Justine, and welcome to this deep dive of Scaling Legends.
And I'm Nicole. And today we're basically bypassing all the dense legal jargon so you, the business owner, can actually see the mechanisms behind these changes.
Exactly. We need to break down what these 7 regulations actually mean for your job sites, your estimating department, and, well, your bottom line.
Because hiding inside this massive wave of compliance, there are actually some very specific, highly lucrative market opportunities for the contractors who know how to adapt.
Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. So our mission today is to walk through these regulations chronologically and thematically, giving you a definitive survival guide for the rest of the year. And just to set the stage here, all the intel for today's deep dive comes directly from Smart Business Automator's Market Intelligence Report.
Which is a lifesaver right now.
Truly. So let's start with the immediate threat to your operations, the one causing pure panic for hiring managers across the Midwest and the South, the human capital shift, and specifically the massive multi-state expansion of E-Verify.
Yeah, the timeline on this is incredibly aggressive. Ohio's strict new E-Verify requirement already took effect on March 19th.
Wow, so that's already live.
It's already live. And Tennessee is following right behind with a hard enforcement deadline of July 1st. Plus, several other states have legislation sitting on governors' desks right now.
Okay, but hold on. Let me play devil's advocate here for a second, Nicole. Running a new hire through a federal database takes, like 3 minutes?
Usually, yeah.
So why is an administrative task causing such a massive bottleneck for mid-sized firms? I mean, it seems simple.
Well, because you aren't just dealing with a single unified federal system anymore. That's the catch. You're dealing with state-specific enforcement triggers.
Oh, I see.
Right. And the modern construction firm rarely operates in just one jurisdiction. So if you're a mid-sized electrical contractor based in Cincinnati, you're routinely taking jobs across the river in Kentucky, pushing up into Indiana, maybe bidding on commercial builds in Tennessee.
Yeah, you go where the work is.
Exactly. Previously, your HR department had one centralized onboarding process.
Right.
A compliant hire was just a compliant hire.
Right.
But now, the legal definition of compliance, the required documentation, and the audit triggers, they all change the minute your foreman's truck drives across a state line.
Man, it's essentially like trying to build a single commercial property using 3 different local building codes simultaneously.
That's a great way to put it.
Like if you frame a wall to Ohio's standard, but the inspector is actively grading you on Tennessee's standard, you fail.
You fail completely. That analogy hits the nail on the head. And the states are no longer relying on random manual paper audits either. They're utilizing integrated data across their departments of labor, taxation, and transportation.
Oh, wow. So they're all talking to each other now?
Exactly. If an auditor walks onto your site, you need to pull every I-9, every E-Verify confirmation, and every daily site log instantly. The days of, tossing crumpled carbon copy paperwork onto the dashboard of a pickup truck, those days are over.
Yeah, that's not going to cut it.
If you cannot produce a transparent, instantly auditable digital trail, you are looking at devastating fines per employee.
Which means your internal document architecture just has to be bulletproof. So E-Verify is the government aggressively monitoring who is stepping onto your physical site. But the federal government is simultaneously rolling out a massive, unforgiving mandate for how you secure your company's data. So we need to talk about CMMC and the shifting posture of OSHA.
Yeah, CMMC stands for the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. Phase 1 is officially live, and Phase 2 drops in November of 2026.
Okay.
This mandate impacts over 300,000 organizations within the federal supply chain, and there are absolutely 0 exemptions.
Okay, Nicole, I have to push back on the urgency of this for the average listener. Construction is a boots-on-the-ground dirt and steel industry.
Sure.
Most of the folks listening are pouring concrete, erecting steel, or pulling wire. Why is the Department of Defense cybersecurity mandate suddenly terrorizing legacy construction firms?
Well, we have to look at the mechanism of modern project delivery. For decades, the perimeter of a construction site was purely physical. You erected a chain link fence, locked the heavy equipment, secured the tool trailer, and your liability was contained.
Right. You lock the gate and go home.
Exactly. But CMMC introduces a digital perimeter. The Department of Defense realized a few years ago that the weakest links in their infrastructure projects weren't the massive prime contractors.
It was the smaller guys.
Right. It was the Tier 3 and Tier 4 subcontractors. It was the HVAC sub holding sensitive mechanical blueprints on an unencrypted iPad. Or the framing contractor emailing RFIs over a public coffee shop Wi-Fi network.
Wow, so the federal government is basically saying your unencrypted iPad is now a national security threat.
That is exactly the case, and that standard is now cascading down to any project involving federal funds or federal adjacencies. Surviving a CMMC audit means you must prove, unequivocally, that your daily logs, your submittals, your change orders, and your RFIs are locked inside a secure, auditable environment.
So a legacy paper folder sitting on a plan table fails the test.
It completely fails, because anyone can walk by and take a cell phone picture of it. And the enforcement of CMMC is entirely binary. You either pass the assessment and maintain your ability to bid on these massive infrastructure projects,
or you fail and you're completely locked out of the market.
Exactly. There is no grace period to fix your IT issues next month.
That binary zero-tolerance approach is brutal, especially when you contrast it with what OSHA is doing on the physical safety side.
Yeah, it's a huge contract.
It feels like a completely different regulatory universe.
Yeah.
OSHA just rolled out a new small business initiative, and their focus is actually on collaborative compliance rather than just penalizing contractors out of the gate.
Yeah. OSHA's posture shift is highly strategic here. The regulatory burden on the construction supply chain right now is heavier than it has been in decades, and small to mid-sized contractors are the engine of this industry.
Right. Without them, nothing gets built.
Exactly. OSHA realizes that if they regulate a mid-sized framing or masonry sub into bankruptcy over minor first-time paperwork infractions, that doesn't just hurt the sub. It halts the entire subdivision, damages the prime contractor, and freezes regional housing development.
So they're trying to help instead of just dropping the hammer.
Right. This new initiative is designed to help contractors build out comprehensive safety programs before a catastrophic incident occurs. They're offering guidance to fortify your safety protocols before an inspection even happens.
It makes sense from a macroeconomic standpoint. Keep the supply chain moving while improving the baseline safety culture.
Exactly.
But speaking of macroeconomic shifts, this brings us to an incredible tug of war happening right now between the state and federal levels.
Well, the environmental stuff.
Yeah, we have these federal mandates tightening in cybersecurity, but at the exact same time, there's a sudden, massive federal vacuum in environmental regulations. The EPA has officially repealed its climate harm finding.
And this repeal has triggered an immediate legal and operational clash. Right now, 24 states are actively suing to challenge the EPA's rollback.
24 states, that's almost half the country.
Yeah. Regardless of how those lawsuits shake out in the appellate courts, state-level environmental building codes are aggressively expanding to fill that federal vacuum.
See, I think a lot of contractors hear about the EPA repealing a massive environmental regulation, and their first instinct is to celebrate.
Sure, they think, great, less paperwork.
Exactly. If the federal government is cutting red tape, shouldn't our lives get easier? Why does this federal pullback actually create a nightmare for estimating departments?
Well, it comes down to the patchwork effect. Contractors, and specifically estimators, crave predictability.
Right, you need to know what to bid.
Exactly. When there's a unified federal standard, even a highly restrictive one, you build a standard operating procedure around it. You calibrate your estimating software, you lock in your material suppliers, and you know the exact rules of the game nationwide.
Okay, so you just adapt to the one big rule.
Right. But by pulling back the federal standard, the EPA has essentially authorized a free-for-all. Because 24 states are writing their own aggressive codes to counteract the federal repeal, you now face a deeply fragmented, highly localized market.
So a project spec in one state could require a totally different compliance model than a project 5 miles away across the border.
Precisely. State A might allow traditional diesel generators for site power and standard concrete mixes, but cross the border into State B, and the local municipal code might suddenly require zero-emission site power.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they might heavily penalize carbon-intensive concrete or demand complex supply chain emissions tracking. And if your estimator uses last year's template and misses that local distinction in the bid,
You swallow that entire cost variance.
every penny of it.
Ouch. So relying on institutional memory is officially a liability. You can't just look at a blueprint and say, well, this is how we priced out the last warehouse.
Not anymore.
And according to Smart Business Automator's Market Intelligence Report, this state-by-state discrepancy is exactly why automated compliance and spec checking is becoming critical to avoid expensive oversight.
It's mandatory at this point.
Yeah, your estimating software has to flag these local environmental anomalies before the bid ever leaves your desk.
Absolutely. The environmental rulebook is actively being rewritten by the week. But if we pull back and look at the broader infrastructure landscape, while climate codes are splintering, there is one area where every single state is unifying.
And cracking down heavily by the end of the year.
Yes, physical site safety, specifically regarding work zones.
Ground level protection. If you are anywhere near the heavy civil or infrastructure space, the deadline you need to circle is December 31st.
That's the hard stop.
Yeah, that is the hard stop for the new work zone safety requirements mandating positive protection.
And for anyone operating outside of heavy highway construction, the mechanism of positive protection is a massive logistical shift.
Because it's not just cones anymore, right?
Right. Historically, visual deterrents like orange cones, reflective barrels, or standard signage, that was sufficient to demarcate a work zone. Positive protection mandates actual physical barriers capable of stopping a civilian vehicle from penetrating the active site.
So you were talking about the sheer logistics of transporting, staging, and continuously moving concrete jersey barriers.
Or a heavy mechanical attenuator truck.
Right. As a highway work zone shifts mile by mile, the cost implications are staggering. If you aren't factoring the rental, transport, and labor time of moving that heavy positive protection into your current bids for next year's projects, your profit margins will vanish the moment you break ground.
And state departments of transportation are heavily incentivized to enforce this. North Carolina just launched a highly specific Struck By initiative.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're utilizing new surveillance metrics to heavily monitor and penalize incidents where workers are struck by civilian vehicles or heavy site equipment within these zones.
But North Carolina piloting this isn't just an isolated event, is it? We see this pattern constantly.
It is the standard regulatory life cycle. Historically, when one state successfully pilots a high-visibility data-backed safety initiative, it becomes the new national best practice within 18 to 24 months.
So everyone else will copy it.
Exactly. Other states adopt the framework because it lowers insurance liabilities and secures federal highway funding.
Okay, so we have heavier physical barriers, intensely fragmented environmental codes, and zero-tolerance digital compliance. It sounds incredibly restrictive.
It does.
Let's look at how the federal government is actually trying to hit the fast-forward button on the housing crisis, because Q1 also brought the 21st Century Road Act. Specifically, Provision 8910 is live right now,
Yes.
and it introduces chassis removal, pattern books, and new lending caps.
This is where we shift from compliance defense to aggressive market opportunity. The Road Act fundamentally changes the speed at which housing developers and their contractors can move.
Okay, I love this part.
Yeah, the mechanisms here, chassis removal and pattern books, they're designed to bypass years of bureaucratic friction.
The concept of pattern books completely changes the pre-construction phase. Explain how this mechanism actually works in practice, Nicole.
Well, getting a new housing development approved traditionally means subjecting your blueprints to months, sometimes years, of zoning board meetings, public hearings, architectural reviews.
It takes forever.
Right. Pattern books bypass that entire gauntlet. Municipalities are proactively pre-approving specific, detailed architectural designs. These are the patterns.
So they basically say, here are the houses you're allowed to build.
Exactly. If a developer or a general contractor selects a design directly from the municipality's approved pattern book, the permitting process is expedited. You are moving from a multi-year approval limbo to getting greenlit in a matter of weeks.
Wait, Nicole, pause on this for a second. If municipalities are pre-approving these exact architectural designs, doesn't that commoditize our work?
How do you mean?
Well, if I run a custom home building firm, aren't pattern books going to kill my margins by forcing me to build cookie-cutter houses alongside everyone else?
I see what you're saying. But it actually just shifts where you make your margin. You're trading high-end, bespoke customization for high-velocity volume.
Okay, volume over custom work.
Right. The margin isn't in the unique architectural flair anymore. The margin is in how many units you can turn over in a fiscal quarter. It is essentially using prefabricated legal architecture. You drop the pre-approved design into place and you break ground.
Wow.
And when you combine that velocity with the new chassis removal provisions, the volume potential explodes.
Now, chassis removal is fascinating from a financial perspective. The mechanism here is converting personal property into real estate.
Precisely. Previously, a manufactured home was titled like a vehicle personal chattel property because of its steel transportation chassis.
Right, because it had wheels, essentially.
Exactly. And this severely limited the types of mortgages buyers could secure, which really capped the market. The new provision standardizes the legal and physical process of removing that chassis and permanently anchoring the structure to a foundation.
Which changes everything.
It instantly converts the asset into traditional real estate, opening up conventional high-cap lending markets for the buyers. Builders who understand how to navigate these new lending caps and pivot to pattern book volume are going to dominate regional housing markets.
But adapting to this volume means your internal operations have to match the new market speed. If you are pulling permits in 3 weeks instead of 6 months, your procurement, your estimating, and your budget variance tracking have to be lightning fast.
Absolutely.
You cannot take 4 weeks to price out a pattern book house if the developer expects to break ground next month. The government removed the speed bump. If your internal engine is still running at 10 miles an hour, you won't be able to capitalize on the open road.
That is the ultimate bottleneck. Speed to market requires speed of data.
We've covered a massive amount of regulatory ground today: multi-state E-Verify fragmentation, the CMMC digital perimeter, OSHA's collaborative shift, the EPA repeal nightmare, the positive protection hard stop, and the Road Act's housing acceleration.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. How does a construction business owner digest this and actually build a strategy for the next 3 months?
The fatal mistake is treating these regulations as future problems. In construction, it's incredibly easy to get consumed by the fire burning on the job site today and completely ignore the wildfire coming over the hill next month.
Ain't that the truth?
We need to look at a chronological Q2 game plan. April requires immediate action on your CMMC assessment. If you touch federal money or sub for someone who does, you must initiate a gap assessment to identify your digital vulnerabilities right now.
So that's April. Then we move into May. May 20th is DOE Spark. For those unfamiliar, this is the Department of Energy's initiative signaling exactly where future federal grant money and compliance standards for green infrastructure and building electrification are heading.
Right, it dictates the future of federal commercial bids. And the very next day, May 21st, is the AGC Demo Day.
That's a big one.
It is crucial because it heavily features the technological mechanisms and software solutions designed specifically to solve the data integration and compliance tracking problems we've discussed today.
Okay, so go to Demo Day to find the tools to fix these issues.
Exactly. Then June needs to be dedicated entirely to work zone safety. You must spend June auditing your equipment fleet and your future bids to ensure you have the logistics in place for the December 31st positive protection mandate.
And as a reminder, Smart Business Automator's Market Intelligence Report advises treating this checklist as an operational priority, using automated project health monitoring to ensure no deadline slips through the cracks.
You really can't manage this on a whiteboard anymore.
No. If you write these deadlines on a whiteboard in the job trailer, they will get erased, ignored, and eventually cost you a fortune in fines or lost bids. Compartmentalize the approach. Tackle CMMC audits week 1. Address your E-Verify workflows week 2.
Exactly. And I want to leave everyone with a broader implication to consider here. We have discussed these 7 laws as hurdles you have to jump over. But look at the macroeconomic reality.
Okay.
A massive portion of legacy contractors are going to ignore these changes. They're going to stick their heads in the sand, fail their CMMC audits, get frozen by multi-state E-Verify fines, and miss out on the Road Act volume because their internal processes are too slow.
They will be locked out of the market entirely.
Which means 2026 might not just be the year of heavy compliance. It might trigger the largest wave of construction mergers and acquisitions we have ever seen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The firms that utilize technology to absorb these compliance shocks aren't just going to survive. They're going to buy up the failing legacy firms for pennies on the dollar. These regulations aren't just a burden, they're a competitive moat. Think about which side of that moat you want your business to be on when the dust settles.
If you know a contractor who's dealing with this new wave of Q1 regulations and E-Verify mandates, send them this episode. It could save them from hefty fines. Hit follow on whatever app you're listening on so you don't miss tomorrow's intel. And be sure to visit smartbusinessautomator.com.